Welcome back to Experience Points, a less formal, more laid-back sort of video where I talk about games that I've played a little bit of but haven't yet finished, and today we're taking a look at Blossom Tales 2, The Minotaur Prince. And Blossom Tales, for those of you who didn't catch my first Experience Points where I talked a little bit about the first one, it is a game that blatantly borrows heavily from the Legend of Zelda series, especially the 2D sprite-based, pixel-based Zelda games, not so much the Ocarina of Time and Forward with the polygonal games. This feels way more heavily inspired by Link to the Past and even the Minish Cap, and I think that that's really what this series aims to accomplish. I don't know if that's necessarily what they were going for, but whenever I play this game, it feels a lot more like Minish Cap necessarily than Link to the Past, at least to me, which is not a bad thing. I love Link to the Past, but I also really loved Minish Cap. So this is fantastic. The game itself does not take itself very seriously. It is an homage. It is a love letter to the Legend of Zelda games, and unabashedly so. Already, this game has definitely grabbed my full attention. Again, the series, it's incredible I can call it a series now, is by a small independent studio. They're called Castle Pixel, and they've released this game on Nintendo Switch and PC via Steam. It's also available on Linux. It is an indie RPG or action adventure, if you will. Very much a simple, basic game to run on your PC. Doesn't really have a whole lot of crazy visual effects going on. If you have a PC that was made in the last 10 years, you could probably run this no problem. So the game itself, though, plays as not really a direct sequel to the original game, Blossom Tales, but instead it is one that takes place several hundred years after the event, same universe maybe. It's hard to say for sure. I think that they're borrowing heavily again from the Legend of Zelda series, where maybe there's not supposed to be a hard and fast lineage or hard and fast sort of timeline. The game is exactly what you would want out of a new Zelda game. It is fun. It is a bit of a head scratcher at times. There, even in the very first dungeon, there was a time when I was stuck for about a half hour, and then I was like, oh, that's what I need to do. So you can pretty much tell exactly what this game is just by looking at it. It is a humorous, quirky, upbeat, colorful. It is a Zelda game that is not made by Nintendo, essentially. And that is totally fine. I love it when a game can wear its influences on its sleeve, and in this case, they definitely do. It's also a nice little kind of humorous romp that is made for people my age who grew up watching 80s and 90s kids movies and stuff. Because you've got references to The Princess Bride. You've got references to, what was The Goonies. Oh, there was a Never-Ending Story at one point where you find this giant turtle in the mud, and every time that it's talking to you, it sneezes and splatters you with snot. The inclusion of characters who are bearing strong similarities, like this owl who has this very awkward dialogue that is very reminiscent, a nice little nod to Ocarina of Time dialogue that is directly lifted straight out of The Labyrinth. The game takes the form of Grandpa telling a story to Lily and Chris about this ancient adventure that took place, which is in and of itself kind of like a reference to The Princess Bride. And every once in a while, the grandpa will introduce these slugs. No, wait, not slugs. Let's make it a wolves. I don't know. Well, what do you think? And then the player gets to choose, was she attacked by a bunch of slugs or was it a bunch of wolves? And I feel like that should really inform you that this game does not take itself super seriously. It is instead just meant to be a fun romp, and it definitely has been from what I've played of it so far in about 10 hours. It has been an absolute blast. The combat of the game is also a bit more intense, especially at the very beginning. That's kind of the way it is with most Zelda games, where at the very beginning, when you only have 3 hearts, you die a whole lot more. But the game is forgiving in the sense that there's an autosave feature that changes, and you get a checkpoint basically every single time you change rooms or change areas. And if you die, you just go to the beginning of that area, which is, again, extremely forgiving and helps offset that difficulty curve that you would get from these increased, more intense boss fights that take more than just, 2 or 3 hits to kill, as opposed to like the beginning Zelda boss fights where it just seems like, oh, just a few hits here and there and they're gone. No, you actually have to survive long enough to survive some of these boss fights, to hit them a good number of times. You can't just go in guns blazing and hope that it works out. I tried that and failed a few times. I have died several times in this game so far, and I don't really begrudge the game for that. That's my fault. It's on me. The game controls very solidly, and every time that I died, it was absolutely my own fault. The secrets, though, are really fun to track down, and the areas are really fun to explore. They have so many little nooks and crevices for you to throw bombs at or to shoot arrows at, and various enemies that, like the skeletons that you have to explode with bombs in order to actually do them under for good. It's a lot of little references. It feels very much like a Zelda game. And I guess that's kind of one of the highest praises that I can really give it. It doesn't just sort of look like a Zelda game. It feels a lot like a 16-bit Zelda game. That's extremely high praise coming from me. Now, one of the things that makes this game somewhat unique compared to the Zelda games is that you don't really have to really worry about managing your inventory so much, and there is a crafting system. So there's tons of things to collect so that you can use them to craft your potions. There's an inventory system where you don't have to micromanage how many bombs or arrows you have. Instead, your bombs and arrows take the form of consumption of your stamina bar, which is pretty nice. So if you're run out of bombs, you just hang on a second or two and your stamina will regenerate, and then you can throw another bomb. So in a way, it's kind of like Breath of the Wild's system, for the bombs at least, but it's applied to arrows and other consumable items, or what would normally be consumable items in a typical Zelda game. One of the other things that's also really nice is that your stamina bar is also useful for dodging, which I honestly kind of slept on for the first part of the game until the first boss fight, when I was like, I actually need to start avoiding some of these hits because he was just taking me out really quickly. So stamina has been a nice addition to even the top-down style Zelda games, especially with the ability to dodge roll out of the way and avoid massive damage. This game has been really just a solid way to spend some time with my Nintendo Switch, which unfortunately I haven't had enough time to spend with lately. So it's been really awesome to have this very lighthearted game kind of remind me of, I mean, it was the Zelda games originally that got me into going down the RPG rabbit hole. And so kind of returning to a game like this feels a lot like kind of returning to my roots and kind of reminding me of what I love about those sort of sword and sorcery, fantasy RPGs, action adventure games, if you will, that just drive my sense for exploration and make me want to go find all the hidden items, explore all the nooks and crannies, get all the heart pieces, get all the stamina pieces. This game is definitely one that, if you are any bit of a collector, if you have any of that compulsion to be a completionist, you are going to want to play this to its end. I haven't yet, but I want to. And I anticipate that it's going to be more of the same all the way through. Just upbeat, lighthearted, comedic, doesn't take itself too seriously Zelda game. So essentially, I guess what I can say is that this game is made for people like me, people who really just enjoy having a lighthearted romp, a lighthearted game to play to take their mind off of things and not have to think too hard sometimes. And just, if you're in between RPGs, this feels like it would be a perfect palate cleanser for you to just sort of shake off some of the really intense fights that you've been going through in some higher stakes RPGs, and instead just enjoy seeing Grandpa tell Lillian's story about this story of Lily back in the day going through and saving a kingdom or whatever. It's funny to see the banter between Chris and Lily play out in the back of the game as Grandpa's narrating this video game. And it's hilarious because there's also small little references to Zelda, even from like the narrator's perspective. It feels very much like Grandpa in this game is me when I'm 90, telling my grandchildren or great-grandchildren about the epic story of Link back when I was a boy, you know, misremembering some things here and there. It's hilarious, and just it's a laugh. It's a good laugh and not a bad way to spend some time with your Nintendo Switch. So I feel like that is high praise as far as I'm concerned. It is not a AAA gaming experience, but I mean, this game is obviously, it is what it is on the face of it. If you see what's happening on your screen right now and you think that looks like something I would be enjoying, you're probably really going to enjoy it. So give it a go, and I hope that I see more from Castle Pixel in the future. But until then, guys, I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a great day, everybody.